Greetings once again everyone, and today I'm checking out another lens from new manufacturer Thypoch, their Simera 35mm f1.4 aspherical. It's a full-frame manual focus lens available on Leica M, Nikon Z, Canon RF, Fuji X and Sony E mount mirrorless cameras. It comes in either silver or this black colour, and it costs about £600 here in the UK, or about $700 US. I'd like to thank Thypoch for sending me one of these lenses for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review and they've had no input into it whatsoever. Any 35mm f1.4 lens is a real pleasure to use in my opinion, and certainly when shooting on full frame it offers you a decently wide angle, but not so wide angle that your subject is pushed away from you, and then at f1.4 you get plenty of opportunity to shoot in darker conditions and even get quite strikingly out of focus backgrounds. Sweet! With this particular lens, Thypoch are selling it on the strength of its build quality and its characterful images. Well, let's take a look. The lens does indeed have a classic look to it, as well as very high build quality, weighing 344 grams. It's made of aluminium down to the metallic lens mount, and the focus ring, situated at the rear, turns extremely smoothly and precisely. It has a crescent-shaped metallic finger tab at the bottom to help with focusing. It feels nice against your finger, but its placement at the bottom of the focus ring means you will have trouble if you're using a very small camera mounted onto a tripod. It might not get past the tripod plate. The lens suffers from quite clear focus breathing here, although it's only at its worst when focused right down close. Then comes the aperture ring, which has a couple of neat little tricks to it. The lens features an automatic depth of field indicator on the hyperfocal scale. Basically, those black dots on the barrel gradually turn red as you stop down the aperture to indicate your increased depth of field. A gimmick for sure, but it actually does look really quite cool. The aperture ring can be set to turn with gentle clicks or to turn smoothly, and while it does indeed feel lovely to turn, the f-stops are not spaced out evenly, which is a slight disappointment. The aperture mechanism has 14 iris blades to it for very smooth bokeh when you're shooting stopped down. The lens's front filter size is a fairly small 49mm, and it comes with a very cool looking metallic hood. Overall, I loved the build quality and aesthetic design of this lens, although with the holes in its barrel and lack of weather sealing, I wouldn't take it out in the rain with me. Anyway, let's look at image quality, and I'll start by mounting it onto my full frame camera, a 42MP Sony a7R III. In-camera corrections are not available with this lens. At f1.4 in the middle of the image, sharpness and contrast are just good, and there's a touch of purple fringing to be seen here on contrasting edges. Over in the corners, image quality becomes very poor. I did check that this was not an issue with a curved plane of focus, but it isn't. Anyway, stop down to f2 to see more brightness and contrast in those corners, but not really any more sharpness. However, sharpness back in the middle of the image has gone from being good to being excellent. At f2.8, that sharpness becomes perfect, and the corner image quality is now beginning to pull itself together. At f4, the corners look decently sharp, and at f5.6 and especially f8, they are looking excellent. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, although f16 now looks quite soft due to diffraction. Overall, we are getting a rather old-fashioned sharpness performance here. The lens is always good in the middle, but you definitely have to stop down to at least about f4 for decent quality to emerge in the image corners. Alright, well, let's mount it onto a 24MP aps-c camera now and see if we can crop out some of the worst of that corner image quality. At f1.4 in the middle, image quality is now looking somewhat soft, and the purple fringing is being emphasized more here. The corners look pretty messy, although not as bad as they were on full frame. At f2, they look a touch brighter and better defined, and the middle of the image is now looking great. Stop down to f2.8 and image quality in the middle becomes absolutely phenomenal. Corner image quality is still rather soft though. However, stop down to f4 and those corners suddenly become nice and sharp, and at f5.6 and f8 they become excellent. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, but f16, as expected, looks pretty soft. Overall, I don't think this is really a good lens for aps-c camera shooters. It's just not sharp enough really, unless you top down quite a bit. It's clearly happier on full frame. Alright, let's hop back on to full frame and take a look at distortion and vignetting now. The lens projects just a little barrel distortion here, which could occasionally be noticeable in my images. At f1.4, its corners are very dark too. Stop down to f2 or f2.8 and those corners brighten up a bit, but you'll never truly get even illumination with this lens. The minimum focus distance here is a slightly average 40 centimeters, getting you somewhat close to smaller subject. At f1.4, image quality is a little softer than before, but actually not too bad. At f2, things are sharper, and at f2.8, the close-up image quality is very sharp. That's certainly something encouraging to see. Let's see how the lens works against bright lights now. At f1.4 things are not so rosy and the lens is suffering from quite a few broad flaring problems. Stop down to f2.8 as I do here and that flaring is only somewhat reduced, so that's a bit of a weakness. While we're working in the dark, let's take a look for coma and sun stars. At f1.4, coma smearing is pretty major on bright points of light in the corners of your images. Stop down to f2 to see it reduced, and at f2.8 and f4 it's finally gone. Let's zoom out and look for sun stars now. At f4 they're already pleasingly apparent. Stop down to f8 or f11 and they get very strong. That seems to be a strong point of Thypoch lenses. Next, bokeh, an important question for a lens like this one. The lens's bokeh is certainly not the smoothest in the world, but it sure has a nice little character to it. Out of focus backgrounds look really nice and interesting here. Specular highlights are very pleasing too, although the lens presents quite a strong cat's eye shape to its bokeh balls at the maximum aperture in the image corners. And finally, on the subject of bokeh, let's have a look at longitudinal chromatic aberration. At f1.4 it's quite apparent, although not dreadfully bad. At f2 it's reduced, and at f2.8 it's finally gone. Overall, this Simera lens is optically a bit of a mixed bag. Its images have a lot of character to them and the build quality is gorgeous, but I was hoping for a stronger sharpness performance. It's not a cheap lens either, but then again, full frame 35mm f1.4 optics do tend to be very expensive, much more than this, so its price isn't completely out of line. The lens might find an audience among photographers who like a more tactile shooting experience and are looking for images with character rather than pin sharpness. Anyway, thanks for watching everyone. I do hope you find these reviews helpful. I love doing all this testing, discovering what these lenses can really do. It takes a lot of time and effort though, so if you'd like to support the channel, check out my Patreon page down in the description below, where supporters get all kinds of exclusive bonus content. Ciao for now, everyone.